Now, I'm excited about this next session. I've known Brad Harris for a number of years, and I don't think there's a better teacher in scouting than Brad. He's been involved as a professional scouter. He's been on the faculty at Brigham Young University, teaching future scout executives, and he has been all across the country, actually all around the world, teaching scouting principles. And some of you have found that beginning new scouting units, there are parts of scouting that you never knew were there in prior Latter-day Saint units. For one example I've noticed is it's very hard to teach the patrol method if you have a very small quorum or troop. But there are some wonderful blessings now as we have larger and larger and larger units. And as Becky Nakagawa in the chat mentioned, they have grown from just a very few to a very large number of young men and young women in their respective troops. And as we have that, all of a sudden we begin to see that there is more to the scouting program than we realize. So I'm pleased to be able to introduce to you Brad Harris, speaking to the topic of the blessings of using the entire scouting program. So Brad, welcome. Nice to have you here. And by the way, Brad and Sandy have just received a mission call to go to Baltimore, Maryland for a young single adult mission beginning the first part of August. So Brad, congratulations to you and Sandy, and we'll leave the time to you.
Thank you, Charles. When Charles Dahlquist asked you to help with the presentation, you say yes. I was fortunate to have worked with him directly for several years, and I've enjoyed our association. I'm so excited about Vanguard as this organization, and very excited to be a part of this today. I appreciate the foundation and perspective from Matt and Trevor. You brought up some of the same things I'd like to talk about today. But it was so exciting to get up this morning on a Saturday, put on my scout uniform, which I must admit I haven't done as often as I would like to in the last couple of years, and put on my wood badge beads, put on my scout socks, and I'm just pumped and I'm excited, and I'm grateful that I can participate in this organization in this event today. Follow up from the previous presentation, I am the membership chair for the Timpanogos district in the Crossroads of the West Council. So we actually had a recruiting night in Heber City 10 days ago. They put flyers, they went door to door with flyers provided by the council, inviting people to a park. It was a beautiful evening. We had several volunteers there. The local troop helped with the Pinewood Derby cars and races. They were using different types of cars, and all the young people who came were involved with that. Boys and girls, kindergarten through 5th grade were there with their parents. We registered several new scouts, Cub Scouts, and recruited some parents, and we proved that you can do that in Utah. And that's what I want to talk about, is kind of the big picture of what I think we can accomplish in these troubled times. And these have been very, very challenging times for scouting. So this is just something that I put together a few years ago, and I wanted to just share some of my thoughts. The magic of scouting, I first observed in 1981 in Corvallis as a brand new professional, right out of school. And up to that point in my life, I grew up as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I was an Eagle Scout and had a good program. But when I was working with LDS and non-LDS leaders, I quickly realized that there was a difference. There was a difference in the way the chartered partner approached scouting. Not that all LDS units were poor or bad and all non-LDS were good, but there was definitely a difference in how organizations appeared scouting. And I've called it the magical versus the mundane. I've been all over the country and seen the relevance and the dynamic, vibrant scouting, and I'm completely sold on its potential and what it can do. And I've also seen units that were not magical. They were just parents just kind of going through the motion and checking boxes, and then having the privilege of working in summer camp, spending with my family 6 summers of my life in camps in California and Oregon and Colorado, and the preparation that troops made to get to camp made it very obvious to me that there's a Grand Canyon of potential between preparation for camp and for scouts. And here's just something I put together a couple of years ago. I wanted to share with you the church policies that, again, a charter partner can pick how they want to use scouting, and definitely the LDS Church did that. Leaders were called. We had a quorum identity of deacon, teacher, and priest, and so we had 13-year-old senior patrol leaders, which you didn't see outside the church. No Sunday activities. The church paid the registration, and then fundraising restrictions. I think we did some things or had some bad habits in the church, or members of the church, in units, that we had, I believe, very clearly an overemphasis on advancement, as has been mentioned. Our tenure was not as good as it could have been. It was improving, but we needed to have better tenure of our leaders. Low attendance at training and roundtables, less skin in the game, meaning that we didn't, our young people didn't go out as often as they should and help raise money. And we saw that at summer camp. Those who were prepared, who had worked their way there, and those who had just showed up. And the rent-a-dad, where a troop, the scoutmaster was not at camp. They had a dad or show up, a different dad every day, and that created some issues of behavior with the scouts. But the good news is there's no reason to have this gap anymore. Some of those church policies that we did, we want to continue to do, but there's no reason to have some of these improper applications as we go forth. In my view, the advantages of scouting outside the church is where there's no callings. That might be a disadvantage for some, but the people are asked, their committees are created, a selection committee, people are chosen, a little arm twisting has to take place. There's fewer fundraising and travel restrictions. 11-year-olds can be 100% scouts. Larger troops, older youth can help lead with the younger youth, which is one of the magic patrol leader councils that we do in the church, or we do in the scouting. Grade versus age. We all move up at the same time. Ironically, the church is now promoting that we all move everybody up in January after scouting went away. It's a much better way to run an organization. Instead of having people leaving at their birthday, they can all graduate at the same time. And then we select the adult leadership, and the youth elect youth leadership. Disadvantages, you pay registration. You recruit and support leadership. The mindset we've talked about are just three things that I think that I've seen are our challenge as I've been through this transition. In Utah, where I currently live, we went from 200,000 youth registered to 10,000. All three councils were combined into one council called the Crossroads of the West Council. Like I said, I'm the membership chair of the district here. And very few of our local scout leaders have had any experience recruiting scouts. And had some great tools that Matt and Trevor showed us. We need to have this growth mindset. And as was also mentioned, in Utah right now, we have twice as many troops as we do packs. Pre-pandemic and pre-other challenges, it was the opposite, and it should be the opposite. We should have twice as many packs as we have troops, because they create a feeder for future scouts. And then the programs, I love the boys and girls, and we have now Lion Scouts and Tigers, and I've seen boys and girls in the uniform, and wonderful. Lions are kindergarten boys and girls. Tigers are first grade boys and girls. Wolf is second grade. And third grade is bears, and then fourth and fifth is Weeblos. So some questions here. Do Cub Scout dens include boys and girls? The answer is they can, but they don't have to. You have boy dens and you have girl dens. And if a pack has boy and girl dens, they're called a family pack. You could have a pack of all girls. You have a pack of all boys. Are Scouts BSA troops co-ed? No, they're not. There's boy troops and girl troops. These are just things that people have told me that they thought they heard, and we're just trying to make this clear. And Boy Scout troops, a Scout BSA troop don't have boy and girl patrols. They're separate troops. I saw one of the chat things earlier about person saying they had a girl troop and a boy troop and how they're growing. And I love the inclusion of boys and girls in our future. And thinking big, looking back on my career and my involvement in scouting, I'll never forget Troop 3 in Corvallis, Oregon, chartered by the Baptist Church. They had their own land next to the river. They had their own tree farm. They had their own newspaper recycling place. They had a trust fund. We held our Cub Scout day camp on their property. When I was in Berkeley, California, Troop 4 had their own scout camp, their own land up in the mountains. They rented it out to other organizations. When I was in Oregon, we combined all the packs in the stake, the LDS stake, into one troop. And instead of having 8 small Pinewood Derby races and 8 small blue and gold dinners, we had 64 young people participating in the Pinewood Derby race. That created a perfect situation with the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8, and it was a gigantic event. We had den leader coaches. Each calling was a state calling. I mean, we need to think bigger than what we've been doing previously. We mentioned briefly about the aims of scouting, but let's not forget character, citizenship, and fitness is why we're in business. The character of what a person's going to be when they grow up and what they do when nobody's looking, and how they treat others, and citizenship in our country and in our families. And then fitness. Fitness can be spiritual fitness, physical fitness, mental fitness. It means to be suitable. And then the methods, how we achieve those 3 things. One of the 8 methods is advancement. And I've used the analogy before. If you were to think of an 8-cylinder car, a souped up 8-cylinder car, it's going to run really well on 8 cylinders. If each of those methods in Scouts BSA is a cylinder, too many of our units have been running on 1 cylinder. It doesn't run very well. Everything revolved around advancement and getting Eagle. And why did we go camping? To check the box for a camping merit badge so we can get our Eagle. And there was less thought about the spiritual involvement or other more holier purposes as to why we went camping. So that's just a list of the ideals for Cub Scouts, Scouts, and venturing, Scouts BSA. And then here's something I put together that kind of shows the progression. In Cub Scouts, they're in a den. We go to a patrol. We go to a crew. Advancement is one of the methods in Scouts. We call it recognition in venturing. In Cub Scouts, we're more neighborhood and family centered. We graduate or progress into the outdoors and then to high adventure. We go from the progression of activities planned by adults to activities planned by the Patrol Leader Council. The ideals are the same, and that should be the purpose of all of our activities, is to help us achieve those ideals. The uniform is a priority with Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts, less so with venturing. Our young people are introduced to leadership with dinners and assistant dinners in Cub Scouts. They have a chance to apply it in Boy Scouts, and even more so in venturing. One of the most spiritual experiences of my life was a wood badge course I attended 10 years ago at Camp Mapledell. I was the senior patrol leader. And this was on the day when all the patrols were giving their presentations about something that they had learned, and watching the progression of Cub Scouts to what was then Boy Scouts to venturing. And I don't know what happened, but the spirit came through this outdoor setting. Everyone was in tears. We were just amazed at this great program and how it could be used to help bring our young men at this point to Christ. I want to talk more about that. So here's the methods, the Scouts BSA methods, is what are they emphasizing and what are our hopeful outcomes with our children. The patrol method is youth leadership and adult shadow leadership. Adults train and teach and then stand back and let the youth run the program. But with some training and some help from adults. This helps our young people willing and able to take responsibility. With Scouts, with advancement, they're learned and tested, and this helps them as they do this for several years, be persistent in overcoming obstacles. And as a parent, just look at that list of outcomes, what you would like your children to obtain and to work on while they're growing up. A sense of belonging with the uniform, In my previous travels, I traveled a lot in my previous job, and I'd be at an airport, and I forgot that the jamboree was going on, and I saw the whole troop of young men coming off the plane in full uniform, walking down the middle of the airport. It was just amazing. We've talked about NYLT, and I'll continue to talk about it. We discovered this as we worked in the MTC, and I'll talk about that the power of leadership that can help our young people actually practice leadership skills and experience them. And we all recited the Scout Oath when we started today. And I love the way it's put. We start with our duty to God, then country and others, and then self. We teach selflessness. In a good troop, young people will camp 40 to 50 nights during their 6 years there, maybe even more. Every one of those nights is a potential wonderful experience, and hopefully we're seeking spiritual experiences and conducting reflections. And that hopefully the outcome is the spiritual strength and capacity to do hard things. And then adult association, selecting inspired leaders, using the merit badge counselor list the way it should be, can create positive association and many adult mentors. So from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we talk about the ordinances. Think about your young people that you work with. We have baptism at age 8 for most, the confirmation where they receive the gift of the Holy Ghost. And then for the young men, the next ordinance of salvation is the Melchizedek priesthood. The Aaronic priesthood is the preparatory priesthood. And for both our young men and young women, the endowment is the next critical step in their progression on the covenant path, and then the sealing. Our goal is to use scouting as a tool to help our young people on this covenant path. And this covenant path should be a constant concern and something that we're thinking about, and making sure that our young men are ordained at the right time, deacon, teacher, priest, and that our emphasis is what is the next step on the covenant path. A survey was done several years ago of 38-year-old men. When I was serving on the board, this was one thing that we looked at one night. This is the power of a mission. The mission is one of the greatest tools and greatest church programs we have for our young people. So they surveyed 38-year-old men and asked them, did you serve a mission or not? The temple, 92% of returned missionaries at age 38 said they'd been sealed in the temple versus 38% non-returned missionaries. At the time of the interview, 76% had a temple recommend. So there's the making and keeping covenants, 21% non-returned missionaries. And you can see the numbers for graduated college, and then attached to that would be held a managerial position of work. We all know anecdotally the power of a mission on our children and on the church, but to have some statistics was very helpful. And my wife and I had the great privilege for 5 years to serve in the MTC in Provo. We had 2,800 missionaries come through our branch. And I kept track of, stories and things that we had done. And we actually wrote a book because of all the powerful things that we'd learned. And we kept track of some of the things. And I wanted to share with you some of the things we learned related to scouting's impact on missionaries and missionary preparation. We interviewed 17 recently returned mission presidents right off their missions, 3 years of dedicating their life. And we wanted to know what are some of the characteristics of successful missionaries. And all 17 of them in private interviews, not related to others, no peer pressure here. First thing they said was, we want missionaries that know how to work hard. They have to have a work ethic. And they said, they've made obedience a personal quest. I kind of expected that answer. They're good communicators. And fourth, and this is an order of number of times they mention it, a testimony of the Book of Mormon. So I asked you the rhetorical question, these four things, can scouting, if properly applied, help our young people gain a work ethic, to gain obedience, to be good communicators, and have a testimony of the Book of Mormon? There's no question in my mind that the answer is yes. And if we use these things as opportunities in all of our planning, we'll make sure that we're helping parents achieve these goals of sending your young person to an MTC with those 4 things ready to go. And we saw, some missionaries that struggled in the MTC, and there were some obvious reasons why that happened. We interviewed 3 different mission presidents, the president of the MTC. We had a great discussion with President Nally in 2015, and we asked him, what are 3 things? Well, he says, here's 3 things I wished all missionaries had, because he dealt with the problems and saw the successes. He said he wished that every young man and young woman came to the MTC with a significant away from home experience before the mission. He didn't define that, but we thought, a semester away at school, scout camp as often as possible, going to NYLT, getting away from home as often as possible, because for many, their only significant first time away from home was in the MTC, and they struggle. Again, he mentions work ethic, independent of the other interviews, and he wished that everybody had leadership opportunities. No question that scouting can help fulfill those 3 wishes. So interviews with these people that had significant experience, we've kind of made a list of the mission should not be the first time that these young men or young women have done these things. It shouldn't be the first time they've been away from home for an extended period of time. It shouldn't be the first time they're used to getting up early in the morning or read the Book of Mormon. And then check out this potential with merit badges. Shouldn't be the first time they should have walked more than 10 miles in a day and bicycled more than 20 miles. We have the bicycling or cycling and hiking merit badges here. They should have shopped for groceries and cooked their own meal and cooked a few different meals other than the microwave, washed their dishes and done their own laundry, be taught a spiritual lesson, balance the use of electronic devices, and approach strangers at the door or in the street. As a parent, if I was raising children today, mine are all raised, I would use these as samples of what we would do as a family, in addition to what scouting can do as a resource.
Brad, if I could just add one thing. When we
Yes.
were working together, we met with the missionary department and said, what could we tell priesthood leaders that will help not only get missionaries there, but keep them there? And their comments were right along your line. They said, number 1, give them an away from home experience before they go on their mission, and teach them to work, teach them to do hard things. And those are right in your list of things to do to prepare them. So.
Thank you. If we get off track with just thinking eagle or just thinking advancement, we lose sight of these more noble and more eternal things. And so we had a chance to get some information from a family therapist who dealt with lots of missionaries, and he talked about anxiety and depression were many reasons that we saw young people coming home from their missions. And he used the analogy, he says, let's say that your level of 7 is your stress level. And so to help deal with your stress, you spend time in your room listening to an iPod or video games or going to the gym. And then you add a new stress or rigor to their life. And he said, how many kids have worked a 13-hour day? They get above a level 7 and they don't know how to get back to 6. We saw some of these breakdowns in the MTC. I'd never experienced it before, of young men and young women that had a complete breakdown where they were physically unable to do anything. They because of all this new stressors that they'd never dealt with before. And I saw missionaries who had this humble, been there, done that attitude, where they had done hard things. They'd done things that prepared them for the MTC. The MTC was another difficult thing, not the biggest, toughest thing they'd ever done in their life. And a book that I read that I would recommend to everyone from Gene Twenge talks about iGen. This was, again, I wish I'd read this 25 years ago, but she's been studying for 30 years teenagers and how they spend their time. And she says that we're on the brink of the worst mental health crisis in decades. And much of this deterioration can be traced to their phones and to social media. And her conclusion here, she says, there's not a single exception. All screen activities are linked to less happiness. Going, beyond the actual physical part of the screen, but going lots of time on screen. And all non-screen activities are linked to more happiness if they spend more than average time on the screen. Something we can take home as parents and grandparents, and as we should remember in our scouting activities. We interviewed President Martino, who was the president of the MTC, and he referred to gaming and videos as making anxiety worse. It says even an hour a day is too much. So to think about these big pictures, I want to talk about what I call the holy habits. Whether we had scouting in our ward or not, we could do these. NYLT requires that you be a scout, but still leadership training. And as we organize troops, Scouts BSA in our neighborhood, and in our local neighborhood here in Linden, Utah, one of our volunteers created a troop sponsored to a business. They had a court of honor last night. They've got 15 boys in the troop. And they're doing great things. They've raised a bunch of money. They're going to a camp up in Wyoming. And some of the leaders from our town of Linden have all, gathered onto this one troop. And I'm just going to go through these 5 things specific of there's maybe more, but what I call holy habits of working with youth. The first would be a planning retreat. This is critical. This is critical in business, that we get away from the gadgetry. We do something fun. We spend some time brainstorming. You bring with you the school schedule, what you have as far as your calendar. Some organizations bring the whole troop. Some just bring the patrol leader council. You plan some big activities and monthly themes. And you come down from the mountain, figuratively, with an annual plan that's got something as a theme for each month, some activities with dates, and you have activity chairs. You have a youth and an adult who are in charge of each activity. And this will help get rid of the common thing we hear of, what are we going to do on Wednesday night? If the youth have had ownership and they know what they're supposed to do and they help create the program, they're going to be more excited, more likely to attend, and they know what they're going to do Wednesday night. That planning retreat is a discipline. It's a holy habit that we should do once a year. And most troops do this in July or August before the school year. The second one is the leadership. The patrol method, in my opinion, is the most powerful and unique thing that Boy Scouts does. Scouts BSA, the fact that we divide, this was from our founder, Baden Powell, that we divide a troop into smaller groups, a gang of sorts. And they have an elected patrol leader and an assistant patrol leader. And the patrols then, their elected leader represents them in a PLC. And the PLC, the Patrol Leaders Council, the Scoutmaster and the Assistant Scoutmasters are there. And the Scoutmaster serves as an advocate from the PLC and becomes their spokesperson to the troop committee, which meets once a month, hopefully. And the Scoutmaster is then the messenger from the troop committee to the PLC. The boys, the girls, the young people, they run the troop with adult supervision, with adult help, with adults using their expertise to help make it. And then in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we want to be sure that we recognize priesthood keys, that the priesthood key gives them the right to preside within an organization, when we should make sure that those deacons quorum presidents and teachers quorum presidents their priesthood keys are being recognized. And this opens up the whole potential of having a troop, one troop that meets together with young men and young women, one or the other, ages 11 to 18, where the older youth are probably the elected leaders. That's the ideal setting. And then we have mentors and we have troop guides, an older young man or young woman who is helping the new Weeblos who just came into the troop as new scouts. And in the Book of Mormon, we all know the story about the sons of Mosiah. And I love this scripture in Alma 26. They use a word that we don't use very often called privations. And privation in the dictionary says it's the loss or absence of a quality or attribute that is normally present. I've come up with the term planned privation. Scouting can be a series. We're not talking doing dangerous, scary things, but planned privations. If they have enough to eat, it may not be what they would eat at home, but I would like you to chat and send me a few chat ideas of what you would think of as a planned privation in scouting. I want to see some of the things that you would think of and how this helps prepare our young people for future privations. In my group here, the mission, which is a planned 2-year or 18-month privation. OA ordeal. I remember that when I was 14. That was my first big privation of my life. Winter camping trip. Yes, I've got stories to tell there about caves built with snow. In that cave with my son and feeling claustrophobia, and my son was having a blast, and I was wishing I was home. Let me see what else we got here. Sleep under the stars, a trail crew at Philmont, work on the budget that they have as a patrol, 20-hour, 50-mile hike. Wow. Yeah, that's one of those things that would definitely prepare our young people. So thank you for your feedback here. As we go to these annual retreats and we're planning activities and we're running, and then we should have, every 3 months we look at that annual plan again to tweak it. We should think about, from a spiritual sense, what are the benefits of a planned privation? And to prepare them for the larger privations of their life. Okay, so 2 quick slides here. In our time into MTC, which was wonderful, we would spend every Wednesday night there, Thursday night, getting to know and training brand new missionaries who'd been there for a day. We were there all day Sunday. We were there Saturday night to help tuck them in. And we would do some training on Sunday. One time during my interview, I realized that one of the elders had a rich scouting experience, and he told me he'd been to NYLT. So we're teaching leadership principles to the missionaries. And I said, Elder, tell us about NYLT. And, with no advance notice, he pulls out this card that I didn't even know existed and starts teaching from this card to this room full of missionaries. And the missionaries were just going, wow, where'd you learn all this stuff? So I learned it in Boy Scouts. And then 3 months later, I tried it again with another missionary who I knew had been to NYLT. And he pulls out this card as we're talking about team development, about forming, storming, norming, performing. And without any advanced billing, starts teaching them in a humble way about leadership and how our district, when we first got here, we were forming, and we've had a little bit of storming, but we're going to take off into the field next week, and we're starting to norm. We hope that by the time we get on the plane, we're performing. This was a example to me of the direct link between an NYLT experience and a successful mission. And in our ward, they had the tradition of not just attending NYLT, but many of our young men at the time served on NYLT staff. So I want to highly recommend that opportunity for anyone who hasn't taken advantage of that in the past. Another holy habit is reflection. This is probably one of the most powerful things that we can do to help bring young men and young women to Christ so they can make and keep sacred covenants. The reflection should be conducted after virtually every event, especially outdoor events. So it can be after a camping trip. It can be after a troop meeting. And it starts with at first, the youth are going to think it's a little odd, but if you get used to this and the youth end up conducting reflections, some of your most spiritual experiences will happen. So you sit down formally after the event and you ask open-ended questions. This is just to get people talking. And at Philmont, they call it roses, buds, and thorns. What went well with this event? What did we learn? The buds. What could we have done better? And you make a rule, and this is important, that no put downs are allowed. Every response is welcome and valid. Some people will say some odd, weird stuff. You don't show nonverbal displeasure. You just say thank you, and you move on. You may talk with that youth later and say, you know, it doesn't really do you any good or anybody else to say stuff that gets us off track, but do it individually, not publicly. And then you end with a spiritual application. But you can find a spiritual application in virtually everything. As the scripture says in Alma, all things denote there is a God. So when I first found out about reflections, I was a venturing crew advisor here in Utah, and we went bowling one night. That's what the youth had planned they wanted to do. And we went bowling, and we met out in the parking lot in American Fork, Utah afterwards with time on our hands. And we went through this, you know, what went well. We were laughing about some of the things people did and whether we put up the guards or not and how bowling worked. He said, how can we make a spiritual application with bowling? Oh my goodness. This went on for about 20 minutes and about the gutter and about, you know, finding the pins, and they'll come up with stuff that you never thought of before. But one of the most meaningful for me was with a group of BYU students. I had the great privilege of teaching at BYU since 2003. And I had a class, an outdoor class, that we'd go out and do several outdoor things. We had a tradition. We had a canoe base on Utah Lake, so we would take canoes out on Utah Lake. This was just 20 BYU students. I know that's not 12 and 13-year-old boys, but we would have a reflection. So one specific incident, we were out on the lake. It was afternoon. The wind came up, and it's getting kind of rough. And being on a canoe on a lake with big waves was kind of scary. We got inside the jetty there in the Provo Harbor, and I was in the canoe by myself. I've learned from past experience with other people, I would prefer to be in a canoe by myself. And I was into the wind, and I was trying to get to the side, and I saw a picnic table where I knew we were going to meet. So I had the picnic table in front of me as my goal. And I was stroking hard, you know, what I'd learned in canoeing to get there. So we're all there safely on the shore. We had survived this little ordeal. We still had our life jackets on, still wet, holding our paddles. We circled up, and we had a reflection. We talked about what went well and how could we have done this better. And, you know, the wind came up, and they already knew that we don't do put downs or cut downs. And then I said, okay, as I was coming into this bay under protection, I was looking at that picnic table. What might that represent in a spiritual sense related to this? And one of the students said, well, Brother Harris, this could be the priesthood or Jesus Christ. I said, yeah, that's our goal, is to have those things help us to get to our destination. Then I said, I noticed that my strokes, I had to stroke hard. And I had to stroke really hard. And I had to make sure I hit the water perpendicularly and stroked all the way through. There was none of these little tiny strokes. I'd still be out in the lake if I was doing that. What might the strokes of my paddle represent in a spiritual sense? And again, I wasn't begging for a certain question. And one of the students said, well, that could be daily scripture study and prayer. I said, yeah, if we do our daily scripture study and prayer, it'll help us achieve our goal, the spiritual goal. We talked about that for a while. And then we got in our cars and we left. If this had been a scout troop, a BSA scout troop, and I've done this many times, when young people come home and mom and dad say, so how was scouts tonight? And the kid will say, fine, or, you know, one word or two words, maybe a sentence. But if parents know that they've had a reflection, then we get in league with the scout leader, and we can work together to help bring our young people to Christ. If they know they had a reflection, then you could have a second reflection. And so back to this lake, these young people went home, hopefully not just thinking that was fun, that was hard, and the activity, check the box, I'm back home again, but thinking, I need to remember to read my scriptures, say my prayers, and be closer to Christ. We use these activities for spiritual purposes. And if they get a badge for it, that's gravy. That's wonderful. So with that, I've shared with you some of the holy habits and some of my thoughts about the whole family of scouting, from kindergarten to graduate from high school, and the programs and the things that we can do to help make sure that we're using the full scouting program, and we're using all the methods, and then we recognize what the aims are. Questions, comments? A 50 miler on the Pacific Crest South, Three Sisters. Wow, that's where I grew up. One of my favorite scout camps is right next to the Three Sisters. And part of the program was to climb the South Sister. Camping on a rainy weekend. Yes, I can relate to that. Think about some of these privations. Other thoughts, questions, considerations?
Brad, there's a question that you might weigh in on. The question came from Eric Pond, and that is that there's some priesthood leaders that are still of the belief that the church no longer approves of scouting, which is very different from not being a charter partner. You have any thoughts?
Well, that's not true, of course. I mean, there's individual. One thing that we're dealing with here in Utah County is the perception from many members that the church and scouting. I mean, is that scouting's gone?
Right.
So that's the importance of, as we said earlier, about being visible. Just having the Scouting for Food drive, which we did here a few weeks ago. They put flyers on every door. It sent the impression that scouting's still alive and well. The church as a church has not said that we can't do scouting, that would be like them saying we can't do soccer or choir or anything else. It's now another tool that we can use for our children as they grow up to help become responsible adults.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting, but Eric's last statement after he asked the question is how do we message truth? And you know, it's interesting, but I've found that if you're trying to message truth, the last thing that works is just trying to engage somebody in a discussion. Generally, if you can give them an experience where they can experience truth for themselves, I always found that helping invite a bishop that may be reluctant, and maybe he has some of these kids in a scout troop, to just come and be part of that. He's not sponsoring that, but he's there with a lot of these boys, and then to be able to share some of these statements by Elder Holland and Elder Rasband and others that have come in the midst of this about the values of scouting, and so you know, I think we have to deal with the fact that some people believe what they want to believe, but we just it's like Elder Rasband said, if we're going to change something, it almost has to be an all hands on deck approach, and people in time will understand. So any thoughts that you have, Brad?
Well, there's a perception there, and again, our numbers, our quantity is down, but our quality should go way up, and we have few restrictions. The pandemic is subsiding, and we've had, you know, as I said earlier, the trifecta of things that were making it very difficult, but I see a lot of hope on the horizon. At this recruiting night in Heber City, it was so cool to see parents showing up with their first grade girls, second grade boys, homeschool. Half of them were homeschool parents looking for resources for their children. And as many people start to miss scouting, there's some that will not come back, who miss what scouting did. There needs to be a place where they know that they can take their kids. Our goal here was to try to have a pack and a troop in every stake. And PTA presidents can be helpful. There's 2 women in our ward who are PTA presidents of local elementaries. I've talked with one of them so far and said, could we go to your school and distribute flyers? And she talked with the principal, and the principal said yes. It's hard to say no to a PTA president if you're the school principal. And getting inside a classroom or even a lunchroom face-to-face with young people about with the flyers provided by the council is really one of the best ways to recruit.
Sure is. Wendy, I think you may have some questions for Brad.
So Mike says, as a scoutmaster, I'm exhausted by the end of an activity and I'm losing the scouts' attention. The scouts are done listening and following instructions, just looking for ideas to help me change things, and that we can start doing regular reflections after an activity. So I think just new ideas.
Well, thank you. So again, being a scoutmaster is one of the most fulfilling and potentially stressful positions we have. And it's you're right on the front level there. One thing that we've learned with reflections is you teach young men how to do it, and then they conduct reflections. And if you have I was involved with a troop when I was in college here that had 1 troop meeting a month, 1 patrol meeting a month. The first week of the month was the patrol meeting with an adult advisor. The second week was the first week was the PLC. The second week was the patrol meeting. The third week was the troop meeting. The fourth week was the camping trip. So I had 1 troop meeting a month, which was well organized because it had been worked on with the PLC and the patrol. The senior patrol leader runs the troop meeting. The scoutmaster ideally should only speak in a troop meeting at the end, scoutmaster's minute. I've seen that work. It's not just in the book. I've seen it work at camp. I've seen it work in troops. So, and then having someone prepare a reflection. One of the young men talk about what we did that day. It's not going to work out really well the first few times, but it does get better. And then you'll see some of those spiritual applications. I guess there's probably some other ideas to that question that anyone else here listening could add to help. From Becky. You should not need to disclose your faith, ideas, as scouting as core of the program. Okay. Anything else about this specific question? And again, the level of involvement by our young people is challenged. They're used to everything happening quickly. So things have to happen at a troop meeting. Things have to be quick, well organized, no shooting from the hip, and allow young people, elected scout, boy scout, boy and girl leadership to run the troop meeting. And here's a suggestion: having a larger group of adults engaged. Yes, there's got to be assistant scoutmasters and other adults there. It should not be a 1 person, 1 adult, or yeah. And probably the best place to do a reflection, just to introduce it to the youth, would be at a camping trip or a hike. Other questions, comments? Yeah, I like the comment here. That doesn't have to be formal. It can be informal. With my family, we do it after each vacation, just driving home. We say, if you were to make a PowerPoint slide about the vacation or slides, what would they show? So there's different ways to do it. Having a spiritual, we want our young people to leave virtually every time they deal with us as adults with some kind of spiritual application. And if parents know that, they're going to be more anxious to help. Practice the reflections at the committee meeting when you use it regularly. Yeah, so it's just a discipline that you'll have to start.
Brad, can I ask a question?
Sure.
from some of the comments and also some experience, I think leaders often have a difficult time finding the balance between letting youth fail as a leader, and so they don't want to intervene too much and do it for them and let them lead, but then also how much do you let them fail before you step in and guide them more?
Good question. And then this is a tough question, but I've seen people come back from a training session where they learned about shadow leadership, and without training, they just launch in and say, okay, young man or young woman, you're in charge. And they're really opening up a potential there for failure. So that's where the presidency meeting or the PLC meetings are used as training, where you actually practice. In a PLC meeting, the PLC, you talk about, okay, let's role play the next troop meeting. And you act it out. Who's going to stand, who's going to talk first? Here's when I'm going to talk. And you do just a rehearsal like you would if you were doing a play. And so you want to train like crazy behind the scenes, but be quiet in public.
Thank you so much. I think that's wise.
Brad, you mean to tell me that you have to train to reflect? It's not a God-given talent that everybody has so that they can do it perfectly. I'm interested to hear that, because I think some believe that there are certain talents that everybody ought to have, and I'm thrilled to hear you say that.
Yeah, I had the great privilege of training this with BYU students, and it was some of my most spiritual experiences after each event. I mean, in the canyons with, steep canyons around us, taking a break for lunch. I get all choked up just thinking about it. Some of not just with BYU students, but we've done this with Boy Scouts and with my family. And having your spiritual antenna tuned at all times. Prepared to do that. And the first few times it'll appear awkward, and some people will be more anxious to do it than others. And you want to draw out from some of those more shy participants. For example, you may be on a hike, and as you're nearing the last 2 miles of the hike, you walk up next to one of the youth and you say, this has been a cool hike. And you reflect, especially a youth that might have already some leadership potential in the troop. And you say, when we get back to the parking lot, I'd like you to conduct a reflection. And the person's going to say, well, how do I do that? And so for the next couple miles, while you're walking next to this young person, you explain the steps of a reflection. And then when you get to the parking lot, you turn it over to this person, and the boys or the girls will be, in many cases, more responsive to a mentor or one of their age group talking than they will you, because they're used to hearing you talk.
Good. That's excellent. I think just the behind the scenes preparation to help them succeed. Shadow leadership was a concept that was introduced in the church a long time ago, but with President Lee dying so early, it just kind of died, and we didn't do a lot with it. But scouting has been doing it very well for years, and you just gave a perfect example of shadow leadership, where the leader teaches and then moves out of the way, but is as close as the youth's shadow while they're experiencing that. So thank you for doing that. That was great.
And in the current children and youth program that the church has put together, you've noticed how they've emphasized, we're not called advisors anymore, we're called specialists, people who are called to have positions. There's a greater emphasis on letting the youth lead.
Yeah, there was a question about how the program with the children and youth is going, and I think we all recognize that it's different in different wards and different stakes, and that it's been hit by the pandemic just the same way as others have, and we just hope and pray that it will come back and it will thrive, and that our youth across the world will be benefited by the devotion of good specialists, good leaders, good priesthood leaders. So
we really haven't had a chance to see how it works, because right after it was instituted, we had the COVID thing, and I'm concerned about the youth of the church.
Yeah,
I'm very concerned about the youth of the church.
I think we all are. I think it's probably time for everybody to go back and look at that wonderful face-to-face that President and Sister Oaks did in February of last year, kicking this off. I don't think I've seen a better kickoff to an effort or a program, and it's time for us to go back and reflect and you know, with the children and youth program, it is so different from scouting that these two complement each other in marvelous, marvelous ways.
Yeah, I would hope that parents can see the benefit of your child will continue to be involved in the children and youth program and Boy Scouts and Scouting BSA and Cub Scouts and venturing as if they were involved in soccer or football or anything else.
That's right. So, well, let's see, Wendy, do we have any more questions for Brad?
I don't
Brad,
see any.
pardon me?
So I do not see any.
Okay, Brad, did you have a final comment that you want to make?
Just thank you for the opportunity. I see a lot of hope in the future. I'm excited about the Vanguard Scouting Association. I hope that we can all be a part of that and that we will reach out in our communities. Someone made a comment earlier about, you know, we've been asked to reach out as citizens in our community, and scouting can be a tool to do that. And I think that there are people, if approached properly with communication and marketing skills, will join us. Just anecdotally, I was talking with a professional scouter the other day, and while I was talking to him, he said a scoutmaster walked in and said 3 young men who had earned their eagle in an eagle troop, and that's what many of these troops were becoming, came back to the troop and joined after their eagle because they wanted, they could sense the programs were bigger and more exciting than what they were going to get.
Yeah, that's exactly right. In fact, I was at a court of honor at Troop 42, which is Matt McKiff's troop down in St. George, and it was held at the Marriott. Marriott had said, come to our conference center. We'd love to have you come and have your court of honor there. And what I noticed was there were a number of boys that were getting eagle palms, that were staying around to provide leadership. And it wasn't just eagling out, but they were there. And it was a great experience. The other thing I noticed was that there was a larger parent or family to scout ratio at that court of honor. Sometimes we've seen courts of honor where there has been moderate. They're always there at an Eagle Court of Honor, but other courts of honor, moderate support, but there was great support there. And that's what we love to see when those kids are on the victor's stand getting an award. We love to see that support. So, well, Brad, thank you very much for your presentation. Couldn't have been better. I've learned a lot. I've taken a lot of notes. And we wish you and Sandy all of the best as you get ready to go to Baltimore. And I envy those young single adults that'll have an opportunity to work with you. So thanks, Brad. Bless you for all you do.